Wow, what a great panel. And as they exit stage left, I have an announcement to make. General Donahue is going to make closing remarks just prior to General Brown closing the event, so you can let your buddies know to be back in the room. Our last panel, ladies and gentlemen, showcases an expert discussion on a highly relevant topic: FMS at the speed of war, reforming foreign military sales for global readiness. To moderate this discussion, we have Major General Retired Peter N. Fuller. Major General Retired Fuller is currently the Managing Director of Merger and Acquisitions and Strategy at Cypress International, which helps industry support the DoD and other federal departments and agencies. While in the Army, he serves as the Deputy Commanding General of the Army Research Development and Engineering Command and Deputy Commander for support of the NATO training mission in Afghanistan. He holds an MA from National Defense University and an MMAS in Logistics Automation from the United States Army Command and General Staff College. Peter, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Well, thank you for attending the last conference, or last panel of this conference, and I'm glad all those FMS questions were asked in the previous one, so we don't have to address them. As you heard, our panel is on FMS, the speed of war and reforming the foreign military sales global process. So first, I'd like to just say thank you very much for attending this. And I know we're between your schnitzel and your beverage because we're the last one. We have three panelists, and I think all of them have some degree of expertise and familiarity in the FMS process. So first, I'd like to introduce Major General Cezary, I always want to say Wisniewski. He's our representative from the Polish Armed Forces. He's a Polish Air Force officer. And if I did my math correctly, he had a lot of experience as the Polish Defense Attaché in the United States when you were doing the procurement of several major systems.
That's true.
And he's now the Deputy Commander of the Polish Armed Forces. To his right is Major General John Rafferty. He's a U.S. Army artillerist. One thing I will always remember about John is that when we started our Army cross-functional teams, he was leading the one on the hypersonic weapon, the long-range hypersonic weapon, and working that capability. He's been the Army PAO, so he knows how to speak in public probably a lot better than I do. And he was, until last week, the commander of the 56th Artillery Command, which you heard about today as they've retitled him, and he will be moving to EUCOM very shortly to be the Chief of Staff. And then to his right, we have Chris Brown. Chris is the Vice President for General Dynamics Land Systems. He is the Global Strategy and International BD lead, and as you're well aware, General Dynamics builds the Stryker, Abrams, and several other platforms. So what I'd like to do is first frame the FMS process. When you heard these other panels over the last 2 days, basically the process is the same, whether you're working from a foreign military sales perspective or you're working from your own organic country perspective. You need a validated requirement. The requirements are generated through different processes. Then you need to align a budget or money to that requirement. And then you need to start an acquisition process to procure, contract, and build and deliver and sustain that capability. And then aligned with those processes, those three processes, are the different approvals and the regulations, and ITAR was discussed briefly, and we'll potentially talk about that some more. So when we look at the U.S. foreign military sales process for fiscal year 24 that ended at the end of last September, it was the largest foreign military sales total that we've ever had. There was $318.7 billion bought by foreign entities through the U.S., and that was a 33% increase from the 23 numbers. And when you look at it, we anticipate that the 25 numbers are going to be even higher than what we saw in 24. But what I found interesting when I did the analysis and looked at the Department of State information is that when you look at the two areas that they articulated that made up that total of 318, 117.9 billion was in the foreign military sales process, and then 200.8 billion was associated with the direct commercial sales. I actually thought it was going to be the other way around, so I was very interested in seeing that. And then when you look at who are the major countries that were buying, the number one was actually Turkey with 23 billion associated with the F-16s that they procured. And then you see a lot of countries buying missile systems, and there's been a lot of, obviously, on Patriots and other missiles, and then aircraft, F-35s, et cetera. When you go to the NATO website and you look at the data for the 24 expenditures on the NATO side, I think these are some interesting numbers to look at. So on the U.S. side, NATO registers that the U.S. spent $754.7 billion in procurement of defense. You will see in the 26 budget with reconciliation, we're over $1 trillion now. And then they just clumped the 31 other countries of NATO, and they said that they had a total budget allocation of $353.2 billion. So it's interesting to see how much the countries have to spend on FMS, and then where are they spending it. When you look at who's been spending and what countries have been growing over the last 10 years, so you look at the 14 through 24 data, I'm just going to give you the top 5 NATO countries that are spending. So Lithuania had a 325% increase in their spending on defense in the 10 years, 14 through 24. Latvia, 315. Hungary, 225. Poland, 214. I think M1 tanks probably assisted in getting that number up. And then the Czech Republic, 171. So those are the top 5 countries, besides the United States, that have been spending quite a bit of money on defense. The Ukrainian war, there's some discussion about it. The Sakir talked about it this morning. The Ukrainian war has actually impacted the totals that the United States has spent on its defense. And predominantly, it's been in the U.S. Army. It's predominantly a ground war. When you look at the 2 funding sources that have come through supplementals, one is the Presidential Drawdown Authority, and the other one is the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. And the totals between the 2 of those has been $80 billion over those 3 years of supplementals. And $50 billion of that $80 billion has been through the U.S. industrial base. And you can see which states have received quite a bit of orders through the companies that are located in those states that are part of the U.S. industrial base. And Arkansas is number 1 because of Patriot missiles being built there, guided MLRS. Pat Mason talked about guided MLRS as a big increase. Pennsylvania, number 2. They have a lot of systems there, BAE systems, and also GDOTS. So when you look at some of the discussions that you've heard about FMS and operations, you hear about speed and scale. And on the last panel, they were talking about how do you scale this up. So let's talk about speed and scale. When the war started, the Ukrainian army was firing about 15,000 rounds a day to the Russians. And this was after the U.S. started to provide them the 105 and the 155 ammunition. And other countries were providing them the 152 and the 120 ammunition. The Russians at the beginning of the war, and this is about all the way up through about September, October, the Russians were starting to fire 50,000 rounds a day. And when I heard the numbers, and I think John would probably look at me the same way, how do you move all that ammunition on a daily basis? It's just amazing to me. But yet, when we're talking about high expenditure rates on a daily basis, the U.S. build rate for 155 ammo back when the war started in February of 22 was only 15,000 rounds per month. And then over the course of the last 3 years, through different funding sources, we've increased our objective to 100,000 rounds per month, and we're still not quite to the 100,000 rounds per month. And what's interesting is the Russians are building at 210,000 rounds a month, and they are at war with sanctions and everything else. When we talk about the foreign military sales environment, you heard it an awful lot today. in the last 2 days, interoperability. Pat talked about something that I think a lot of countries are becoming very aware of. It's one thing to buy the system, it's another thing to maintain the system and have the life cycle costs of the system for that long period of time. And then a word that a lot of people don't like to hear is the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, or ITAR. There's a lot of discussion about what we will or will not allow countries to have through the United States, and for different reasons. And it's not going to be discussed in this panel, but AUKUS, the agreement that we have between the US, Australia, and UK on the initially Virginia-class submarine, which is our attack submarines. The AUKUS Pillar 1 is about how do we share technology and get commonality and use the same platform. But Pillar 2 is going to be most likely about how do you address the ITAR challenges that we have. And then it got brought up in this last panel. When you talk about FMS, how do you get timely delivery? I mean, this is a framing discussion before we start the panel, because delivery timelines, as a former PEO and a former PM, when you had something on contract for the US government and then you had to add more to the contract, sometimes that was a good thing, sometimes it was a bad thing, because it just put more burden on your contractor sometimes, because they had to scale up, but yet everybody wanted it to be delivered as soon as possible. And then the other item that came up yesterday was the fragility of your supply chain. So if you buy a M1 tank or a U.S. government 155 or 109 howitzer, where do you get the sustainment? And then where is that sustainment when you are buying a system that you buy from a country in the Far East? And we're not talking about China, we're talking about South Korea. So if you have a breach out, where does that breach come from? It has a different supply chain than what you're going to have when you have commonality on the same platforms. And then one thing when you're talking about the last panel about all these different activities, contractors want to understand how are you going to protect their intellectual property? How are they going to maintain that technology so they don't lose that technology because they've shared it, or inadvertently it got shared by others. So that was the framing of foreign military sales. I've been in this process for a long time. I've done a lot of foreign military sales. And sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes you just say, wow, the bureaucracy doesn't seem to want to support this. So with that as a concept, I wanted to ask the three panelists, who I appreciate you attending and participating. If you had a magic wand and you were involved in being able to use that magic wand to answer or to address three things, what three things would you change in the foreign military sales process, and why? And why don't we just start at this end, so we'll just go right from left to right. So Cezary.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for having me in a panel, and it's always a great honor to be among this, distinguished experts and talk about the FMS. But let me start with a few thanks. I would like to say thank you for the US Army for what you're doing in Poland, especially since February 22. Your deployment to my country, to supporting us at a very crucial time, was amazing. And I really want to say, my appreciation to you for your deployment and presence and training together in Poland on the NATO Eastern Front. Additionally, I want to say thank you for US military and the US Army for being a part of the total package FMS approach. It means that when we're buying something through the FMS, we get a support from the US service by the provided training, by providing the TTPs, and this relation is so valid for us. We value this relation, so that's kind of, important. Thank you at the beginning. So if you ask about the three things, make it cheaper, make it faster, make me more agile or more flexible. FMS is very rigid rules and regulations, almost 1,000 pages. So it's rarely a few people can actually be expert in this, process. But I would say that it's high above my pay grade to manipulate or to change the FMS. But I think that from the buyer perspective, there is a lot of pros and cons connected with the FMS. So first of all, it's a government to government. So for us, it's probably the easiest way how to acquire the proper technology weapon system which we need, which we generate requirements and then move forward. For other countries, I think that maybe it's this corruption aspect, so that this government-to-government process allow some nations, some countries avoid the corruption in the system. It's not a factor for us, for Poland, but I think that we really value the US service being in this process, because the US service is like a trusted agent in a procurement process. So even though the government to government negotiate, I really want to have, because I see the marketing words from the vendor, I see the DSCA or US government approach to get it done, but I see the US service as a trusted agent in a system which allows me to negotiate better, to understand the system, to make just a better process to acquire and introduce to the military. So we value every US service was a part of this FMS case. What I really see as a challenge is that because this process is pretty long, Poland made a decision to experiment a little bit with direct commercial sale as well. We bought the MQ-9 Bravo under the DCS. But unfortunately, if you're buying any modern advanced weapon system right now in a DCA, there's always a piece of the FMS because of the sensor, because of the effectors. And even though you want to speed it up by doing the direct commercial sale, the FMS slowing down the process. So at the end of the day, we negotiate the DCS as long as the FMS case. So there was no benefits for country. Finally, we inked the contract, and this capabilities is coming to Poland soon. But I think that it will be much more effective if we separate these two things, and one get this privilege of the speed as the most important part of why the country is moving to direct commercial sale. So in Poland, because Poland spent about 5% of our GDP already for security, it means that there is a lot of money on the table. The challenge is that we have to spend it in a smart way. Through the FMS, we are buying the weapon system, but what we make in a contract for the follow-on support as well. So the sustainment piece, life cycle cost is very important. And that's why we have to be very careful when we negotiate the delivery or the purchase, to be sure that we fully understand the life cycle cost and how to address this challenge in the future. And that's why we always talk with the US services about that, how they handle with the sustainment, with maintenance, how they address this. For example, the capabilities, it's supposed to have contractors, or you have to do the organic in a unit, or I should have talk with the vendor to talk about the depot level maintenance, for example. A lot of challenges, but thanks on the process in FMS, we get a great expertise from the US military, from the US government to sort it out. Thank you.
Thank you. John, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I do, sir, and I'll as a previous panelist said, I'll riff off of the general. And so from my previous position, I definitely want to say thank you to the NATO allies and how much we appreciate their investment. I think particularly in the fires warfighting function. I think that's definitely the strength of the alliance, and it may be the place where there's been the most success in foreign military sales. And probably has really stressed the industrial base as well in terms of keeping up with the production. If you listen to General Donohue's, probably very impassioned description of the Eastern Flank Deterrence Line, or if you had a chance to use one of the visualization tools that would show you how we envision that being fought, you'd probably come away with a couple things. One is that's going to rely heavily on trust across the alliance, but then it's also going to rely heavily on very rapid capability development. And I just say that capability development also relies heavily on trust. And so on the previous panel, when asked to wrap up, when the panelists said that, hey, we really need our industry partners to deliver, that really goes to trust. And we're going to have to generate a lot of trust, both in how we fight, but also in how we develop the capability as an alliance and as a team of an alliance with industry partners in order to realize that important capability. I think that a couple things also on the previous panel where Das Deck described all the people in the room supervising one APMS or APM. And I haven't been a PM, or I haven't been an FMS customer, or I haven't been a FMS deliverer, but I do understand some of the challenges associated with the program, but also in a very bureaucratic process. In the early days of Army Futures Command, as we were wrestling with a requirements process that seemed industrial and out of date, probably the worst thing we did was just look at everybody who was part of the process, all professionals who have risen to the top of their game in their specialty, and we just looked at them and all said, hey, your system sucks. But we didn't tell them how to do it differently, right? And I think this is the case for that too, right? It's an entirely logical process with really qualified people in it, but not every step is required in a sequence, right? So all we want to do is try to generate some simultaneity in the FMS case development so that we can move more quickly. That doesn't mean we're going to skip steps. And so I think there's room to do something like what we did for an abbreviated CDD so we could get the process going faster. Maybe there's a way to do that in the FMS process as well. And then I think the last point I get here also came from the previous panel. I guess that's the advantage of going last, is I had a chance to talk to a lot of industry partners this week and get some feedback from them, some of our national partners, and then also listen to the previous panel. And anyway, so it was also Das Deck that talked about ways for collaborative technology, right? So it's kind of the SCO model. How can we take what exists and use it differently for a new capability? And maybe there's room for that in FMS, in taking advantage of our alliance and all the creativity and special capabilities that are out there, and look for ways to bring those capabilities together, and also how to bring partners into a case before it's a program of record. I know that there's precedent for that in the precision strike missile, which I worked very closely with Lockheed Martin and PEO Missiles and Space and AVMIC on that, in bringing in the UK and the Australians earlier. Now, they had things to offer, like a great big place to test and other things. So there were advantages to having those partners early in the program. And so maybe there are ways to do that in Europe as well. That means we can bring people in before something is a program of record and it's in the FMS catalog. That's it for me.
Thanks, John. So, Chris, you have the magic wand. You've heard,
Yes.
I've got an operator, I've got a requirements generator. What would you change in this process?
Well, as a representative for industry, I recognize that FMS is a process by which I think everybody will, for as long as this process exists, feel some level of frustration, because there's so many equities represented in the FMS enterprise. And then when you overlay onto that the combatant commander objectives and the partner nation objectives, and then you peel back the partner nation equities, and you've got political, you've got military, you've got economic. I mean, there's a complex system of systems here that inherently is going to have frictions that will require us to fine-tune it. But at General Dynamics Land Systems, as a strategic partner to the U.S. Army, we are clearly, our perspective is we are a partner within the FMS enterprise. And so while there are times that we think it could be fine-tuned, we just have to step back and look at the performance of this system and the incredible capabilities that have been delivered around the world. Just, you mentioned some statistics right off the bat. I mean, we are delivering volume through this system at unprecedented levels. So how broken is it, right? I mean, there's a lot of really good things happening. That said, there's always areas for improvement. And so my comments, I want to assure, because I know I have a number of partners in the room right now, that they're taken in the context of how could we do things better. I really enjoy this opportunity at the show because I haven't been doing this my whole life, but I've been doing this a lot of my life in the FMS space. And the events like LANDEURO, I mean, a bit of a reunion, a bit of a gathering of the clans where people come together, that we see each other in our partner countries or at different events, and we get to compare notes on how things are working and where there are areas for improvement. So let me just start with the procurement process itself, or the acquisition process itself within the U.S. Army. The patch for the acquisition core, Alpha to Omega, let's go to the Alpha, which is how early can we start thinking about design for export? And I would suggest to you many of the frictions that we have is because we're not thoughtful early enough as to the elements of exportability that we want to build directly into the systems. And so what happens is you're trying to create, if you call like a system, a DNA strand, so the classic system that's going into U.S. Army service, and then you have derivatives of that go into your partner nation FMS cases. There's very rarely a situation where a partner nation wants exactly what the U.S. Army is operating. That's where the conversation starts, right? I want exactly what you're operating with the following list of changes, right? And so I want to build my own ammo. I want to have my own comm system. I want to have all these other. And so there's ins and outs, pluses and minuses that happen, and I think, could speed that process up if we have a little bit more forethought as new systems come online. So design for exportability is number one. The second one is, I think, releasability. And I think we are making this process, regardless of all the reforms that DITSA and others have been working on so hard on the interagency releasability process, there's still sometimes where partner nations are incredibly frustrated because I'm in one domain, let's say a land systems, buying a system that has this level of complexity, but I've already purchased over on the maritime or on the cyber or on the aerospace segment something of this level of complexity that's already been released. And so there's many examples out there. I won't use them specifically, but this causes a lot of friction and churn that I think could be avoided by essentially a whitelist of releasable technologies in target countries. When in major corporations that deal in hundreds of countries around the world, there's 214, I think. If I think of my time at General Motors, where we did export financing for a number of our dealers and distributors, we had by country payment terms, all sorts of different restrictions and allowances that each of our regional subsidiaries or our equivalent of COCOMs could operate under. And so that's just one simple example to suggest that I think having our partner nations informed, our embassy teams informed, our COCOMs and our industry informed of what is the art of the possible within different technology spaces, different demands for different countries, that would really speed us up so we don't embark on an FMS process and then stall when maybe another approach could be more appropriate. I think the last piece is COCOM involvement. I think there's a real disparity between COCOMs, and it can be personality dependent. And I'm not talking about the combatant commander. I'm talking about really the country teams and then down at the environmental leads with respect to what do they truly want for partner capacity, and how involved are they with those partners as they're deliberating on what systems to procure, and making the articulation clear with the partner countries as to what interoperability benefits they get from buying from U.S. Army sources of supply. So if that conversation happens up early, and the partner nation says, yeah, I want this capacity, but for a range of other reasons, U.S. Army, political, economic, what have you, we're going with this other source of supply, boy, that would free up a whole lot of capacity within the FMS system, including industry investment, and let us focus on other targets. So again, I think it's designed for exportability, it's releasability, and COCOM involvement. I think those fine-tunings would really help us increase the speed of FMS.
Chris, appreciate that. And yes, as you said, when you're dealing with all the different countries, like you said, 114 countries, you end up with different standards across the countries, and you're trying to work through each one of those, and sometimes it can be very difficult, I know. So, Cesar, you talked about this. You buy an M1 tank, and you're looking at, and well, actually Chris ties into this also. I saw in the Warrior Corner your panel discussion, the panel discussion that was going on from the 5th Corps that was talking about how the tanks are going to be procured, when you're going to integrate them, how you're buying ammunition initially, and then you're doing separate contracts for the field service reps and sustainment and all the other things. So when you start down the process of an FMS sale, typically you see, here's my total cost, and then now I'm thinking about the life cycle cost. So are there things in the FMS process that you think that could be adjusted to ensure that you really see exactly how much it's going to cost for long-term sustainment? So instead of buying the ammo, I think you're buying the initial ammo from the U.S., and then you're talking about doing your own production in Poland for the ammo for the tank. And what about spares and other capabilities? And when you talk about a tank, it's not you're just buying a tank. You're going to buy the recovery vehicle that you need to ensure that you move, and all the test equipment, the training equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So how did you think through this whole long-term sustainment cost? And are there ways that the FMS process could adjust to lower that for you?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the tank, so M1, it was from the beginning when we started the negotiation, the idea from the Polish government was to work closely with the vendor to build up the maintenance and sustainment capabilities in Poland. Historically, in country like Poland, medium size, 40 million population, we have ambition to do a lot of things by ourselves. And there's a few technology we believe we are pretty good. We do like a manpads, we do the radars, and we thought that we are pretty good at the tanks. Unfortunately, we lost some capabilities. That's why we thought from the beginning that this procurement is a beginning of the great cooperation with the GDLS, and to set up some capabilities, transfer to Poland, and work in Poland. It was very important because at the same time the US made a decision about deployment of the US arm formation to Poland, which use the same tanks. So from the beginning, when we talk with the US Army, when we talk with the vendor, we just saw some kind of the opportunity for us to work together to support each other in the process of maintaining and sustaining the fleet of the same vehicle on our soil. So that was like the thinking at the beginning. And it looked sexy, perfect. But the devil is in the details. So when we start negotiating, we just discover a lot of issues, a lot of challenges we have to cope with to move to this position. And of course, on our side, we have like two different industry. One is a nation, country-owned industry, with the PGZ, and there is another just private entities, pretty robust as well. So always when the government want to bring something the maintenance to Poland, they consider PGZ as a primary partner for US vendor to start working together. So it took more time than we thought at the beginning, but right now the Polish company WZM is some kind of the MOU or some ideas how to work together and support our tanks and possible the US vehicles as well. And I should mention that in the Army preposition stock in Police, there is a tanks as well. So technically, the Polish maintenance are working on this vehicles as well. So we have some kind of initial knowledge how to handle with this vehicle. So yes, from the beginning we thought about it, and we would like to manage the risk in a system, but having some kind of the national capabilities to offer the cooperation with the giant dynamic land system. But like I said, it's always a challenge. It takes time, some efforts. The good thing is that my government made the decision to invest money, so it will be much more easier to sort it out and start operation. However, the Polish logistics system is stretched out because we have like 4 different main battle tanks right now in our inventory. So we have to pretty much reinvest, or I'm sorry, just to think it over how we're going to operate in a wartime. So the peacetime, yeah, we have a contract with the different vendors. We have some know-how in Poland. We can handle that. By the crisis and the wartime, that's a nightmare. How we're going to support. So first of all, we want to use the same ammo for all the tanks. I'm not sure if it's possible or not, but that's kind of the idea. We want to establish the local capacity and capabilities to support these vehicles in Poland. But it's, like I said, it's always a challenge. We've thought about this from the beginning of the process, but it's not easy. It's a challenge.
Chris, John, if you don't mind, I'll jump past you and go right to Chris. Chris, your thoughts on FMS process, any adaptation as you think about long-term sustainment of products?
Yeah, I also saw the presentation earlier today with regards to the 5th core presentation on the Polish procurement, and I smiled because we take a lot of pride in the success, but during this journey, that's been almost 4 years of, at least 4 years of bringing the Abrams capability into the Polish army and completely reshaping the deterrence posture of NATO on the eastern flank. There have been moments, I'm not going to surprise anybody here, where elements of the Polish and American sides of this FMS case were frustrated by the speed of which things were progressing. But I would offer you that sometimes steady is slow, slow is steady, and steady is fast. All of the fundamental elements that both sides required to get things right, to get things in place, have now enabled this capability to come online. And as we continue to deliver out the M1A2 SEP V3, that capability will increase every month as that capability comes online. In industry, we have to step back at certain times and just let things unfold, but we haven't been idle. And the General mentioned a number of entities, both Polish state-owned enterprises and Polish private-owned organizations. And so we can anticipate where this convergence of procurement and operational usage of the vehicles and sustainment concepts. And so how do we position the FMS system to accommodate and be ready to deal with the sustainment of the tank? And so we have been putting those enablers in place, including supplier development. And so there are going to be a system like Abrams is an FMS-only type capability. So how does a country like Poland create some economic activity while operating and buying more Abrams tanks? Well, you've got to jump ahead of the requirement and anticipate that there's going to be a need for local supplier participation. So we've been doing that. We've been qualifying suppliers into the Abrams supply chain without an order, without a directive, without an LOR to make that happen. We've been partnering without direction, without an order. We've been doing those types of enablers, getting all of our Polish licenses in place, getting small subcontracts in place to practice and learn terms and conditions, Polish commercial law, employment regulations, safety regulations, all those things that will bite you if you think you can move fast and skip steps. And so I think we are well postured, the FMS enterprise, to not only to deliver additional tanks in the future should Poland require that, but to sustain the system within the requirements and capabilities of Poland, both their organic capabilities and their commercial capabilities, so that they're ready to fight tonight. They're ready to give real operational level deterrence on NATO's eastern flank, and we're all committed to that. I would tell you that Team Abrams is more than just General Dynamics Land Systems, right? We are the U.S. Army's partners, but it's even more than that. It's BAE, it's who make the M88 Hercules that support the vehicle and get it recovered when it gets stuck. It's Honeywell, it's Allison, it's DRS, it's Kongsberg. It's a whole community of companies that are operating without direction, without an order, without an LOR, to make sure that we're talking and positioned so as Poland evolves its sustainment concepts and structures, that we're ready to do that, both from the United States and in Poland itself. So I think this is oftentimes, industry is criticized for not being postured well enough. And there's limited things we can do without an order. But I would tell you in this particular case, I can't think of something less of investment without major investment, without an order, that industry isn't doing to be ready for long-term sustainment of the fleet. So I appreciate the question on Abrams, because we're, as you can imagine, we're hyper-focused on it.
Sounds good. So we're talking about the FMS process, and when we talk about it, it technically includes foreign military financing, foreign military sales, and direct commercial sales. And Cezary, you talked about this when you were looking at the procurement of the Abrams and the other subsystems of doing DCS on one end and trying to do the FMS on the other side. So do you see advantages or disadvantages? Well, you tried it, but advantages over, do you see advantages doing DCS, direct commercial sales, from vendors such as General Dynamics Land Systems versus going through the foreign military sales process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that historically Poland stick with the FMS as a primary vehicle to procure the weapon system, but recently the lead time for a delivery, the negotiation time between the LOR and LOA, Inc., it's longer and longer. So that's why Poland chose to go to DCS for MQ-9 Bravo, because it was like an urgent need for the Polish military for ISR capabilities at that time. And the idea behind this was that it's supposed to be faster. We didn't think about the money, we just thought about to get it done as soon as possible. Personally, I really like FMS because of this total package approach type. It's, for example, many countries in Europe, not only Poland, but Poland is among them, we lost the capacity to do the test and evaluation in country, to do the experimentation at scale. We lost these capabilities in NITs. We didn't have resources for that at that time. So when I do the FMS case, when I buy jets or the tanks, the part of the business is a training, I mentioned about that, but there's a tactics, techniques, and procedures. So if something going on with the system or just tactics may change, I get this information from the US system, from the US service, because you're doing the test and evaluation all the time. So for a country like Poland, I have a choice to stick with this TTPs provided by the US service, or set up all this test and evaluation community, which will be able, at the end of the day, to generate the TTPs. Cost money, time, and sometimes, like in my particular case, F-16 pilots, when the Russian started usage of R-77-1 and R-37 missiles, I didn't have information how to fight with these missiles in my jets. But a few months after this information, the US Air Force step in and say, hey, we know how to do this. That's a part of the secret package for me. They change TTPs, I get this knowledge, and I adjust my training. So my pilots are flying more active versus active against long-range missile. So my point is that without having the test and evaluation community in the Polish Air Force on the Polish Army, I still know how to operate, how to fight. I know how to win, which is very important, not only fight. So we always have to make a decision. DCS is no this kind of support. FMS is a package, so this is a part of that. And of course, the training capacity. United States has a very unique training capacity. You always can offer the different countries some kind of the slots for the training. And these amazing things. You know, for a politician, important thing is just to picture during the sign-up ceremony or ribbon cut ceremony. For me, initial operation capability or a full operation capability is the most important point. So if I can speed up the training based on US military capacity, if I can speed up the reaching this initial operation capability, that's a target for me. And I think that FMS can give and actually give us this unique opportunity to speed up the process, to get everything set up earlier, and in the future be supported with the new TTPs and the new information about the weapons and about the capabilities which are important, and I can get it without setting up the whole test and evaluation community.
Thank you. Hey, John, I'm not going to try to throw you a curveball, but I am technically. So in the last panel, they talked about how there was differences between the COCOMs on how they manage foreign military sales. As you go up to the COCOM and in your position, what are you going to be thinking about as you hear about the capacity for FMS or DCS? One thing I would say about FMS is through the COCOM, they can also vector in to say they want you to get that capability faster. So they can move you in the queue based on where the priority is of the theater and based on the COCOM input. Any thoughts on as you transition in a few weeks to another job? And
I'm glad I brought a pen up here because I've been making some notes. And so when Chris talked about the COCOM involvement in FMS, I wrote that down as something I should probably take with me when I start on Monday. So that's one. But thinking about it more in the types of coaching or role that the key players in the combatant command ought to be performing in this process is how do we take advantage of the strengths of the partner to guide them towards a capability that is best suited for them. And I think back to many of us, especially in the U.S., would have some experience with the Afghans and the Mi-17 helicopter. Right? I mean, I know what eventually happened with that, but they had a generation of experience in maintaining that aircraft and keeping them there. They're really good at it. It was perfect for them. So, I mean, I know our circumstances are different here, but we have some of our industry partners that have on display here today and on the floor incredible examples of how they've taken an organic platform to a country and modified it with a gun on the top or some kind of counter-UAS capability or anything like that, which goes to the previous topic of sustaining that so that it's ready, to your point. And I think that's what we want is there is certainly a goal of commonality and interoperability, but it has to be ready. And so focus on what that country is best at, I think is the best way for them to contribute ready forces to the overall plan. So I'm certainly taking that with me and a couple other notes along the way. So thanks for highlighting that, reinforcing it for me.
There you go, helping you on your new job. Chris, your thoughts on FMS versus DCS? I know you've done DCS on several other countries.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely pros and cons to both, and it's really about the right tool for the right job. When we think about the COCOM involvement, just to pick up on the previous comment, it's really what is the capacity and capabilities that we want that partner nation to have, and what role does in this case, the U.S. Army want to play in delivering that? And so there could be, and there are times when there are COCOM priorities for that country that don't align with what that country is acquiring. And so they're not going to get a ton of support, and frankly, they want to compete a certain requirement. And FMS doesn't really work well at moving through a competitive procurement in the land space, our experience. We watch F-16 and our U.S. Air Force colleagues do a number of great things globally with respect to entering into fighter jet competitions and winning that. F-35, they've competed for that. And if you look at design for exportability, F-35 was actually, I think, a case study in how to do that. So when I think about, but the COCOM has to, I come back to that. They have a great voice to play in saying, hey, industry, we don't care, or this is really important to us. Those are two equally valuable statements that we need them to articulate so we know how to adjust, partner, and resource and invest in those opportunities. So when we think of NATO countries, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, that are looking to meet their new NATO requirements for land force capability into the alliance, that's driving pressure on what they need to procure and IOC dates and FOC dates, like the General previously mentioned. And so in a number of areas, that means we need something that's ready to go quickly, whether it's EDA or something that's quickly that comes off the line and we can get that capacity in through an FMS case, add the training, add the sustainment. FMS in that regard is the right tool for the job. There's other NATO countries that already have that capacity, so the COCOMs check. We're not worried about the modernization of their land forces, but they're off doing a procurement. Perhaps that in that regard, DCS is better. At the end of the day, what I would remind my U.S. Army partners is when we're participating in either FMS or DCS, the economic ecosystem behind that sale is active. And so the Army's equities are represented in both areas. So if I sell a Stryker, for example, FMS, or I sell a 8x8 wheeled armored vehicle DCS, I'm still putting a Caterpillar engine in it. I'm still putting an Allison transmission in it. I'm still buying Michelin tires from South Carolina. I'm still, the steel's still coming out of Pennsylvania. And so that industrial base is staying warm, and that, I believe, is in the interest of the U.S. Army. So I would just highlight that FMS and DCS, it's right tool for the right job, but Army equities are represented and, I think, taken care of in both.
Thanks, Chris. So a question we got from the audience is, with interoperability being one of General Donahue's main talking points, why is FMS not taking Patriot backwards compatible? Some nations are ahead and some not backwards compatible, meaning that they can't work with other NATO nations. So the Poles have bought the Patriot system. You're the COCOM that will have Patriot in a lot of the countries too. Now, obviously, they're in Ukraine and other systems going over there. What are your thoughts on the capability? Because as you're probably aware, we have the PAC-3 system. We have PAC-3 that has MSE, so it's a system upgrade to the radar, upgrade to the missiles, but you still have PAC-2 missiles. You still have GEM missiles out there. They have different capabilities. But it's probably the command and control and the radar that this individual is talking about. Your thoughts? Should everybody have the same baseline? Is that the type of interoperability that you think that General Donahue is trying to achieve, or certain countries will have different capabilities? It's because where they bought them in the process and when you refurbish them, et cetera, et cetera. Your thoughts?
So I believe that Poland made a very brave decision. When we signed up the contract for a Patriot, we made a decision to pursue with the IBCS system. So at that time, there was an ICC and IBCS on the market, and Poland got the Yoki waiver actually to sign up the contract before it was operational approved in a US Army. So that was like a brave decision. There was another issue with the old radar versus the brand new Latin radar, which we wanted to buy the 360 radar. Unfortunately, at that time wasn't available on the market, but we really wanted the system in Poland in place as soon as possible. So I think that this IBCS solution is a crucial for the possible NATO members who wanted to get this anti-tactical ballistic missile system. And because it's an open architecture concept, you can, and we're doing this in Poland, we integrate our radars, our sensors with this IBCS system so we can guide the missile or get the situation awareness from the different sensors in the same time. And I believe that it was a very brave and the proper decision to stick with this IBCS the capabilities. And what I really appreciate is that because of the great success of this IBCS, there are other vendors like MBDA which make a decision to invest money and integrate the CAM missile with the system. So for us, when the government make a decision, yeah, we need the different layer system. The idea was to go to the CAM because it was already integrated with IBCS, which makes us a little bit cheaper, but it's much faster to wait in the line for integration and accepting all the risk in a system. So yeah, I believe that John Donahue is right. I believe that the more country is buying pretty much the same system, the integration is 100%, this Patriot system or IBCS can allow everybody to integrate their own assets. Like I said, Poland, we really think that we're doing pretty much great base radar system. We manufacture this radar for us and for other customers. So that's why we really want to integrate these radars with the IBCS, which pretty much make it cheaper, but this technology is, I believe, important to spread out outside of the Poland as one of the users. So yes, this is important, and because of some technology is more successful than the others, the IBCS is a great success and a good direction to move forward for many countries in our part of the world.
John, your thoughts?
So from our position in direct support of SAGU, have developed a much greater appreciation for how the Ukrainians are fighting the air defense network, and a much greater appreciation for the capabilities that the Russians have and are continuing to develop, particularly in the ballistic missile threat space. And we know that a reconstituted Russian army is going to have a lot more of these high-performing SS-26s, and they're learning from the Ukrainian air defenses as well. So I think there's probably very little room for going backwards in the Patriot space, which will protect our population centers against indiscriminate attacks by the Russians. So the investment in IBCS is not just brave; it's absolutely 100% necessary. But I mean, to your point earlier, that we know that it will be a networked air defense system of layered capabilities, legacy, less modern, and the most modern, and that will be absolutely essential to protecting our troops and our people, and frankly our industrial base as well. So I think that I don't understand all the specifics about the backwards compatibility, but we certainly have to be clear-eyed about the threat and recognize that we must continue to invest in the most capable interceptors and the most modern C2 system, because there's no room for latency or error in protecting the most important critical assets.
I appreciate that. I think maybe the other answer could be the COCOM says we really need to get everybody up to the same baseline and really understand how Poland has done this and how do you get the other countries to move in the same direction and make it a priority.
Another note.
There you go. Chris, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
No, I can't comment on Patriot. I'd just be freelancing, so it'd be fun, but...
Okay, sounds good. When we were talking about all the foreign military sales, we're seeing this is what other countries are buying through the United States. So when we talk about the European NATO members and the discussions about ramping up their industrial base and getting more participation, how do you think this is all going to fit back together? Because you don't snap your fingers to build a tank production line. You don't snap your fingers to get a Patriot production line and all these other systems. So how do we think this is going to fit together? Is this going to be more about partnerships? Is this going to be about, when we talk about the interoperability, it's going to be about the partnerships of how, as you were talking about, Cezary, you're having your industry build certain components, and actually, Chris, you talked about how to expand out the Polish industrial base to support the Abrams specifically. So how do you work this when you say, we need more capacity? You don't want everybody to chase the same shiny object and have everybody build 155 ammo, and then there's no demand for 155 ammo, and now you don't have the other things that you need. So how does your country think through this? Because you do have your own country industrial base that you're thinking about, like you said, your public and private resources.
You're right. What I really think is that the European money or European concept and industrial base and what we are building in Poland and US, we should work together. So let me say one short story. Our crop haubits, we use like 3 different runs of ammunition runs before the Russian aggression on Ukraine. When we hand over these haubits to Ukraine, based on the international efforts, the new ballistic tablets and the data to the crop was introduced in such kind of a fast manner, they can use like 12 different runs. So even though we manufacture this stuff, we use 3, they use 12. This showing that if we change approach and we can certify like a different type of the ammunitions for our weapon system, it will be much more easier to boost the capability in the industrial base, because every vendor would have to be a part of this cake, part of the solution to certify the ammo to my weapon system. So I think that we should work together. I don't see that competition is good, but I think that we can use the great idea from European Union, NATO members from European Union members, from our industry, from US, and just work together. It's not easy. It's an effort. We have to, allocate resources to get things done. But I think that based on a different country capabilities, if we think and execute this in a smart way, we can be successful at the end of the day. So even though there is many countries, different interests, different capabilities, at the end of the day, we can be successful. But that's kind of a little bit our leaders in suits and the military brass work, that we have to allocate some resources and put some efforts to get things done.
John, like to add anything?
Well, I think he nailed it. The Ukrainian army's ability to integrate new munitions into various platforms has been remarkable, but it's also been out of existential threat, right? And risk that we have not been willing to take in our capability development. So to get to a point where we are any munition, any launcher, as was described as a very important goal for NATO, I think we will have to come up with a way to test and certify in ways that maybe might make us uncomfortable now, and begin to categorize risk in a way that's acceptable to commanders and national authorities for when that might be required, and then also to how we handle and store ammunition. There certainly are NATO standards for many things, but to how we go from handling and storing to delivering and resupplying, because many of those munitions are really quite sensitive to rough handling, and we do want them to be ready, and so we're going to have to tackle some problems that we really probably haven't wrestled with before. But we know what is possible. We're seeing it, and it's really quite remarkable.
Thanks, John. Chris, before you answer, can I add 2 words to your thought process? IP. So as we talk about doing co-production and trying to build out the common industrial base and a global industrial base, how do you manage IP and from a GDLS perspective?
Well, I think the high-level conversations about interoperability in 32 nations come out of a NATO conference, and they agree that we got to be more interoperable and adopt common standards. And then Heidi Grant was interpreting Washington speak earlier. Let's interpret NATO speak. Everyone goes back to their respective nations and goes, that means they're going to use our stuff, right? So when a German speaks about interoperability, it means you're going to buy more stuff from Germany. When a U.S. guy says you're going to buy more stuff from us, I mean, clearly that's what everybody was talking about, right? Because our stuff is the best. So we got 32 countries. Not one of them wear the same boots. And we're going to talk about a common fighter jet or a common radar. I mean, like, so I think we need to take a bit of a appetite suppressant with regards to interoperability and start small. Go back to some of those NATO stand eggs that, for those of us that remember the inter-German border in the 80s and Ready to Fight Tonight and those types of things, it was those minor enablers that actually created a lot of interoperability and capacity across the alliance. Then we can start talking about whether we need to have a NATO tank or a NATO armored vehicle. Because until you've got those confidence building elements in place, talking about intellectual property and how do I release that and how do I enable my partner countries, all of that's doable. Industry knows how to do that. Starts with money, right? Because the shareholders made a decision. And I know about intellectual property with regards to the U.S. Army, the equities, because they own intellectual property in the defense industrial base because they've paid for the development of those systems. So this is a complex issue that we can't wave our hand at and say, we need to be more interoperable and we need to share IP. There's a lot of devils in the details, and I think we need to just scale it back and start with some confidence-building measures to prove that we can do it, and maybe not pick the most complex systems, but pick those ones that are smart and actually have a disproportionate benefit to deterrence and interoperability.
So as you were speaking, I was thinking maybe we're going to a more simple system of how do you do interoperability. Maybe the regional sustainment framework is an example of how you get to interoperability, where you have a common location where Abrams tanks from the US, Abrams tanks from Poland, Abrams tanks from that are going into Romania get repaired. And you can also repair the Leopard tanks, and you can repair a Challenger if you're getting it from some other location. So you can have interoperability there. Instead of having to take that pack and send it all the way back to the US for a repair, you just do it right here, and everybody works it. And then you expand it from, I've got a large density of M1s running around the theater. I've got Bradleys running around the theater. They have the Caterpillar engine. Allison, well, actually, they don't have you have a different system. That's on the Striker. But the point is, do you start looking at how do I repair Bradleys and AMP-Vs and 113s and all the other systems, Boxers, et cetera?
Yeah, and I think that's the approach that industry is largely looking at in these informal discussions that I mentioned earlier, which is let's do the right thing. We know where the alliance is going. Let's get in front of it. And like the fact that Poland operates 4 tanks, okay, I'm through that emotional state of they didn't buy all Abrams. Now let's get on with it. And so if we can create a capability, I mean, we went into Poznan, which is essentially between Berlin and Warsaw, and what we found in our industrial investigation is world-class capabilities across the board and all the capabilities that you need to maintain advanced ground forces. And so those capabilities are there in partnership with General Dynamics, with BAE, with Honeywell, and once you create those workforces and reconstitute that ecosystem, then it's available for other parts of industry. So it's not exclusive, those capabilities, to a certain platform. I think they're available for other platforms.
All right, so we are getting down to the wire. A question that I have is, when you look at the Ukrainian-Russian war entering its 4th year, what are the lessons that we've learned from this war in terms of volume of supplies needed, lead time from request to delivery and use? because you have to do the training of a lot of these systems also, and then the sustainment of these. So, Cezary, your thoughts?
So, first of all, I think that all of us, before this aggression, thought about the war as a very short endeavor, and we are going to win. What we see on Ukraine, like you said, 4 years long war, our approach changed completely because we understand right now how much ammunition, how much we need them on the stockpile, and how much we have to do in adaptation or in contact. So there's a great efforts in our country to invest in a nation resilience, to build up the some kind of system which can support the fight in the future, like investment in they call this Starczawschód in Poland. Anyway, so the thinking has changed. What I was surprised a little bit that how much politics is engaged in this process. Some countries cannot sell, some countries cannot deliver, other countries stop. I mean, this is so complex situation. So I believe that we are very lucky to be a part of the NATO, to be a part of the European Union, because I'm a believer in Article 3, Article 5, and the collective defense. It means that all this process is supposed to be much more effective than what we see in Ukraine. But I appreciate the ability to adopt what I can observe in Ukraine. So the military, this is Chatham House, please. The ability to change in a very conservative formation like a military is not perfect, it's not good. We have to learn how the Ukraine military has changed and adopted in a very hostile environment when they didn't have enough tools actually to fight and win. And I think that we have to change ourselves, I'm talking about the Polish military, to be more open for innovation, more open just to change ourselves. And this is a very difficult process.
Thanks.
Thank you.
John?
Yes, sir. I think the general's point, his last point, sustaining a system's relevance through protracted land combat are some of the most important lessons that we can learn. And so the platforms and weapon systems that the Ukrainians are using into the fourth year are the ones where we can probably glean the most insights. And the ones that are the most effective, whether they're drones or ground-based systems, are the ones that are open enough for them to adapt on a weekly or even daily basis. And so that, like I said, sustaining a weapon or a platform's effectiveness for protracted conflict has got to be something that's built into it, and it clearly requires industry cooperation for that. I think another couple things to observe from that, although we don't have great insights into I think the actual flow of sustainment and inside logistics command, but we can marvel at their ability to sustain a large land army into its fourth year. But we do have some insights into readiness of operational readiness of different platforms, and the ones that are doing the best are the ones that have a lot of commonality, so mindful to discussion earlier about what should a role of kind of land force advisors to our allies as they consider entering into an FMS agreement should be what will they be able to sustain, what's common with their other systems, and what are they good at maintaining, and I think those are really clear observations and conclusions that we can draw from the Ukrainian conflict.
Thanks. We're down to the last 50.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'd say what's allowed industry to move at the speed of war for the sport of Ukraine has been orders. There's a lot of discussion about demand signals. For those that are military in the room, let me ask you, how many times did you go into an operation and give demand signals to your troops? Right? You give them orders. industry responds to orders. Now, we have flexibility. We can work under a whole range of contracting mechanisms, but I mean, in the last 2 years, we've had CHODs in NATO say that industry should be on a war footing. Some of those countries since then have not bought one round of 155 ammunition. So imagine if we got on a war footing for that nation, bought all this material, built all this stuff, we'd be sitting with all sorts of inventory. So it's just not the way the industry operates. So we need to come up with a better terminology than demand signals. It didn't work in Ukraine, orders work in Ukraine.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you all very much for supporting us on this panel, and I think we're going to go
Let's give them a round of applause. Great panel.
Good, thank you. Are we leaving?
As they exit stage right, we're going to have closing remarks from our host, our co-host, General C.D. Donahue, followed by General Robert Brown. General Donahue, sir.
Hey, first, to all of you that are still here, remarkable. You get a prize from AUSA of $1,000 on the way out. But you can only send in a demand signal to one of the things, so you can actually order things like was just talked about. To all of the AUSA team, General Brown, sir, thank you for your leadership in all of this for the first LANDEURO. You know, every time you come to these events, everybody talks about stuff and, hey, this was great, and okay, but then what? So the and then what out here is there's two things that are crystal clear. The first is the Eastern Flank Deterrence Line. And the last panel talked a lot about STANAGs and stuff like that. Well, there's a new form of STANAGs. And that's the purpose of the Eastern Flank Deterrence Line, is to establish STANAGs. In my opening comments, I talked about a common launcher. I talked about a common fire control station. I talked about optionally manned. Well, we're going to do industry days, and we're going to break down each part of the Eastern Flank Deterrence Line. And we're going to say, industry, come in, and here's what our expectations are for interoperability, your ability to pass API, everything else, okay? Because I put a demand signal out on the U.S. Army side, but I can't place an order. On the LANCOM side, I have much better ability to actually get a nation to put in an order, okay? So whenever you come, you're not just coming to talk to the United States Army, you're coming to talk to all nations of NATO, so all 32. The other thing that we're going to establish is a vehicle that whenever you come to Industry Day, you can fast track your stuff with Ukraine. And we're in the process of figuring out the financial side of all of that as well. And that's part of some of the new efforts that you've heard President Trump and the Secretary General potentially start moving forward on. We still have work to do. I don't want to make it sound like we have it figured out. We don't, but there's great potential. And so all those things are going to come, that's the what next for each and every one of you. And AUSA will be part of that. Army Futures Command will be part of that. Our acquisition, Allied Command Transformation, okay, the 4-star there in Norfolk, Virginia, the French 4-star Admiral Pierre. I talk to him all the time. He will be here also to make sure that they're part of it. And then clearly NATO, you know, that actual body will be here as well. So I just want to make sure everyone understands the what next from everything that we're going to build upon. And again, if you all would, the vision of LANDEURO started before I even knew I was coming to Europe. And it was General Bob Brown. So if you all would, please give him and his team a big round of applause because they're the ones that put this together. General Brown, come on up, sir.
Yeah, to recognize. Well, thanks. Tremendous team, AUSA, and but none of it would have happened without the great work of U.S. Army, Europe, Africa, and General Donahue. Thank you, because you really, a lot of us ought to sleep really well at night with him in this position because could not get any better. So we're very lucky. So I want to really thank you, a lot of you, for staying. I wish we could do like, hey, look under your seat. And those of you who stayed, maybe a new car or something like that, but we're just a nonprofit, so we can't afford that. But we do thank you for staying. And what a tremendous, I was walking around the floor, and the most common thing I heard was, wow, this was great. We had tremendous interaction. It was unbelievable. And why didn't we do this before? But we're certainly going to do it again. And I normally say, it was the best event ever for one. I'm not going to say it this time because it's the first one. But we've set the bar extremely high, no doubt about it. And but it's just a tremendous job across the board. I want to thank some of General Donahue's team that did so much. Senior Executive Service, Kevin Marcus is amazing leader. Thank you. Please stand. I wanted to bring you up here, but now, stand so we can thank Kevin. Unbelievable. And the G5 team, thanks so much. But Major Andrew Pingray and Captain Colin Edwards, come on up. Come on up here on stage. Let's go. Hustle up. They did a terrific job. First of all, Major Pingray, this guy was unbelievable energy, and really appreciate. He was the lead planner for LANDEURO. He developed the agenda, wrote the base order, delivered the briefings to senior leaders, all that fun stuff, majors get to do, iron majors, a superstar. But, he attended the planning meeting. He directly enabled the success of the first ever LANDEURO. So thanks, Andrew, really appreciate it. Just fantastic. And then his sidekick there, the captains really do all the work, right? And unbelievable. But Colin, thanks for all your work as assistant planner. And yeah. Coordinating everything, frag orders, working groups, planning gaps, working with industry, host nation partners, just unbelievable. So really appreciate it. And I'll give them the coveted AUSA coin. It's got Point du Hoc, Normandy, going back in history, such a key moment. And then our, of course, modern day soldier representing the Army, and it's what we're all about. So really appreciate you guys. Hey, thanks so much for attending. Again, this is the first, but just like Land PAC in the Pacific, we're on our 14th year of that. And so we're long overdue for LANDEURO. So this is certainly not the last, and we look forward to seeing you next year. We also have this tiny little event in October. It's the largest land power exposition in North America, the AUSA annual meeting, 13 to 15 October. We hope to see you there. We had 100 countries last year. And really an amazing event to network, connect, educate, inform. You don't want to miss it. So we'll see you there in October. And again, thanks for helping us make this first LANDEURO such an overwhelming success, to our tremendous industry partners and all of you here. So let me recognize these folks, and safe travels. Enjoy the rest of your time here in Wiesbaden.